Together, we can achieve anything. Together, we're polluting the world. Together, we're destroying the environment. Together, we ruin the climate.
Or we can change everything. Together, we can stop pollution. Together, we can go green. Together, we can produce sustainably.
We can achieve anything.
Together,
It's possible.
we can make production
Carbon neutral.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Barbara Buchner. I'm the Global Managing Director of Climate Policy Initiative, and it's my true pleasure being here today with you and moderating this panel on green economic recovery. The COVID-19 crisis has laid bare the social, the economic, the supply chain, and the environmental weaknesses that are no longer possible to ignore. In 2020, global growth contracted by 4.6%, and extreme poverty, global extreme poverty, is set for the first time to rise in over 20 years, and mostly in developing countries who are expected to be really affected in a particular way. So the pandemic has not only created massive uncertainty with regard to jobs in the short term, but it has also accelerated long-term structural shifts. But in its wake, the world's most prosperous nations have actually managed to announce an unprecedented level of government spending of 15 trillion US dollars. That's more than 15% of global GDP. And the sheer size of this economic injection implies that it will have lasting implications for decades or even for generations. So while born out of a terrible crisis, it provides us with a rare opportunity to spend this money wisely so that it not only implies we can address short-term economic factors, but it also lays the groundwork for longer-term infrastructure and systemic changes that we need so desperately in order to really address the climate crisis and also achieve the other important sustainable development goals. The question is, how? My organization, CPI, we've been at the forefront of putting forth policy and financial solutions for the green economic recovery. And this is why I'm so excited to be here today to moderate this panel, this distinguished panel, on really how can we foster the green economic recovery in order to make sure that it benefits both and addresses both the COVID crisis and the climate crisis, and it benefits the people and the planet. So let's get started, and let me introduce my distinguished panel here. It's my real pleasure to introduce on my very left-hand side Ministerin Eleonore Gewessler, who is the Minister of Climate Action in Austria. Wonderful to have you. Close to Eleonora, we have President Werner Hoyer, who is the President of the European Investment Bank. Very warm welcome. On my right-hand side, we have Clemens Hallmann, who is the CEO of Hallmann Holdings. Wonderful to have you here. And then on my very right-hand side, we have Minister Gerd Müller, who is the Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. Let's get it wrong. You're like laughing. Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany. I did get it right. Wonderful to have you here. Very warm welcome. And last but certainly not least, it's a real pleasure to also having Kate Raworth with us, who is the author of The Donut Economics, and I very much look forward to knowing more about that. But let's get started, and let's dive right into the first round of our conversation here. And let me start with you, Werner Hoyer. Let me start with the role of the EIB. EIB obviously is the European Union's arm of lending, and you're the largest multilateral lender in the world, and also one of the largest providers of climate finance. So the EIB, the EU Climate Bank, has obviously become extremely important in this green economic recovery. So we'd love to understand a little bit more how you're doing this. How can you maybe explain just how can someone access the money from the EIB, maybe from a government, from a state, from a city? How are you doing that? And share with us your knowledge in this context.
Well, the best way is to come with good projects. And we have been in this field for decades. The bank is more than 60 years old. But over the last couple of years, it became evident that a climate bank would be needed, which would link innovation, climate, and development. These three dimensions belong inseparably together. On climate projects, well, we have pledged in the United Nations in 2019 at the Climate Summit to be climate or Paris aligned by 2021. At the beginning of this year, we were there. Secondly, we have pledged that by 2025, 50% of our projects will be climate or biodiversity projects. And thirdly, we have pledged to boost the economy by triggering an investment volume of 1 trillion euros by 2030 for climate-related projects. Now, these are huge figures, but they need to be implemented. And the idea of my institution is to be an engineers and scientists-driven bank. This is quite unusual, but I must say that when we find something new in the world, we have experts in-house who can tell us, okay, this is the way one should follow. So that is true for life science, where we were very, very active in the COVID situation with vaccine research and all these things. But this is also true for climate issues, and I think there we can make a difference. And when I made that announcement in the United Nations General Assembly, in front of all the political leaders from the world, I did not have the backing of my board. That came later, and I must praise the member states of the European Union that they took that step. It was courageous, and not everybody in the world was happy that we moved forward because that put pressure on others.
Fantastic. Well, certainly EIB and you have shown a lot of leadership in this context. Again, just the different pledges that you mentioned, I think, is incredible. I actually want to follow up on one of them, because you said that EIB is planning to invest 1 trillion euros by 2030 in climate-related projects, which sounds like a really big undertaking, but we also all know that this is what needs to happen. But we obviously all love the plans, but today, as we have heard many times, we are keen on action. So can you share maybe a concrete project, one of the good projects that you said that really kind of is an example of this climate action?
Let me address that question with two responses. Number one, first, you have to avoid things that harm. That's the most important thing. You can make 50% of your projects climate-related. If with the other 50% you undermine these positive effects of climate action, then you make a mistake. So this is the one thing. This is why I've decided we move out of any financing of fossil fuel projects immediately. The second thing is you need to go into the development of new technologies. If I look at for instance, electricity need in Africa over the next 20 years, within 20 years, some people say, within 20 years, there's a necessity to get 5-fold electricity supply in Africa. If you want to increase that by the factor of 5 within 20 years, then you will see very, very soon that present technologies do not go for it. So we need to invest in new innovation for new technologies for this. And then you arrive all of a sudden at ideas which 20 years nobody had on the screen, from hydrogen to offshore wind farm, which is now getting huge, and these wind farms are getting huge and are less a burden for the coastal areas. Or you arrive at new technologies like the battery factories that we are setting up in Sweden. So it is remarkable. For that, you need, however, an institution that can afford to be wrong. Because if you really want to innovate, you must have the courage to fail. We live in my country, in Germany, in a society where failure is not an option, and that destroys so much potential. We must give the opportunity to fail, get up again, learn, and begin anew. This requires, however, a broad portfolio of activities into which you can invest, and then you can incur a loss and it doesn't destroy the entire institution. So I think this is the way. Keep always, and I see the development minister sitting there, keep always innovation, climate, and development together.
Innovation, climate development, couldn't agree more. And I think what you also said, like just make sure that we get out of the misaligned areas such as fossil fuel and really push the boundaries where needed, but replicate also what works, so you have this diversified portfolio. Thank you so much. Minister Leonardo Gewessler, let me come to you. We've just learned how EIB is supporting climate action, what is some of the triangle, the innovation, climate and development. What does this mean for Austria as you were addressing again this double crisis of the COVID pandemic and of the climate crisis? Over to you.
Thanks a lot, and also thanks a lot for the invitation today. I think what we all need to be very aware of, and it makes me confident also listening to many of you, that we all have a good understanding that we are at an absolutely crucial moment in time. We're in the middle of a big transformation. It was mentioned on the panel before, and the time is now to invest in a better future, in a greener future. We do have an enormous opportunity at our hands to shape our economy, to shape our society out of this moment of crisis into a better, a greener, a climate-friendly future. And let me be very clear. For this, we need more than words. We need action. And it needs action from all of us. And if on this stage today there were medals rewarded as climate action heroes, then maybe we should all take a look at that more as a reminder than as a reward that we absolutely need to take action now. And what does taking action mean, and what do we take from also the EIB's work and much of the work that's done in other countries and around the globe, is that we need to invest smart, we need to invest green, we need to reform smart, and that's absolutely crucial, we need to stop investing in the past. And this is where the struggle starts. Whether it's in infrastructure investments, in energy investments, we need to end investments in fossil fuel infrastructure. We were 11 countries struggling to make that pledge a reality in ending priority for gas infrastructure at the European level, so there is an uphill struggle. We're working on phasing out gas and oil heating systems in Austria, so we need to really put our words into action, and I'm counting on all of your support who's here in this conference today to make all of this a reality. And we have a chance at our hand. We have a European investment plan, the RRF, which gives us an enormous opportunity. The European Commission has put the Green Deal at the heart of this program. So there is a minimum quorum for climate investment, which in Austria we took very seriously, and we actually I'm lacking now the English word. Anyway, we almost invest double what's needed in climate investments. We make sure that none of the money goes into does harm to the climate, but it's only as good, all the investments are only as good if we have the framework and if we have the necessary regulatory frameworks to support that. So I'm very happy to announce on this stage that Austria will finally be among the states with carbon pricing from 2022. Ooh. So we're just negotiating that. Also counting on your support for that one.
Oh, I was waiting for this moment. It's a long time.
Investments that we're taking now, because what does this tax reform, what does carbon pricing mean? It makes investments in the future just much more sensible. It rewards those who want to make a contribution, who build houses that are energy positive, who invest in our future. And the other option is, if we don't do that, if carbon doesn't get a price, it's all of us who pay it. It's all of us who pay that. So let's face this, let's be honest to ourselves, let's push for change, and I'm convinced now's the time, and the framework is good, the international development is good. We need to seize the moment and actually really make this happen.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Time is now, but again, also, there is a real opportunity, and we're just having a video now that actually shows you this opportunity, so let's look at it.
I left partly because of the oil crash, but also I got tired of just how dirty it was. I actually spent quite a bit of time out at that particular patch. And you get all that dust and dirt out there. It's such fine dust, everybody calls it moon dust. So you're breathing that in, getting it all up in your pores, all over your body, in your eyes. You get that raw crude oil on your skin, which is not good for you. It gets all of your tools, all of your trucks, all of your clothes. It ruins your clothes. Solar, you don't have to worry about that. It is smelled when you drive past an oil field is a byproduct called naphtha. And it's just shy of smelling like an open sewer. And that will permeate into your pores and it'll cause you to smell like that. Everybody there is basically conditioned to say that that's the smell of money. My wife, one of her first trips over here, I had just gotten off work a couple hours before she got into town. Obviously got off work, took a shower and everything, and still she comes in, gives me a big hug, kind of leans back, wrinkles her nose and goes, "Oh, Troy, what is that smell?" And I just laughed. I'm like, "Oh, that's the money, sweetheart." Oil crash, like many, I found myself without a job. And I found myself working in the warehouse of a local solar installer. It has been my pleasure and a blessing to be part of a sustainable and responsible industry. Solar truly is the future.
Because the majority of people don't know what we are talking about when you say climate change. But they do know when you say pollution is killing 7 million people a year worldwide.
Ideally, we're going to be energy independent. We're going to have clean air. It's very important. My health, my wife's health, my children's health. We do a lot of camping and backpacking, and we adhere to the tread lightly mindset. Just leave it better than you found it. So a clean environment. I want those great outdoor places to be here for my great grandkids.
Well, clearly lots of side effects that need to be priced in order to make sure that we really understand, what are the costs and the benefits of certain things. I did want to just mention the International Renewable Energy Agency actually reported that notwithstanding the pandemic, renewable energy jobs continued their growth in 2020. They're now at 11.5 million worldwide. So I'd love to just hear from you, Mr. What has Austria done to basically foster this green economic recovery that also generates some new green jobs?
A lot, but I'll try to make it very concrete because green stimulus always sounds very abstract. And the story that we just saw of Carol is extremely inspiring because what we're doing here is about future, it's about health, it's about people, it's about opportunities, it's about jobs. And if we're saying we're building a better future, then actually this is quite literal. We have to take it. We are rebuilding many of our countries. We're putting solar on the roofs with people like Carol doing that. We are changing heating systems. We're building new train tracks. We're really rebuilding our countries in a very literal way and renovating houses. And all of this creates quality of life, but all of this creates value locally, and all of this creates opportunities, and opportunities for many people. It's the electricians, the plumbers, the solar technicians, the train drivers, the tram drivers. You can continue this list. These are all green jobs. These are all future-proof jobs, and it's our duty to make them good jobs as well. And what we've been doing is really investing in all of these areas, in circular economy, in renewable energy, in renovation, in exchanging heating systems. We've have the biggest train investment package that Austria has ever seen to really use this opportunity. And I know we're talking about a health crisis that we're just going out of, but every crisis is a moment also to rethink and a moment to do things better, to do things differently. And I think that's exactly what we're doing in Austria. If we're saying we're investing $10 billion or euros in renewables in the next 10 years, if we're saying we're only the next 2 years, we're investing 750 million euros in changing heating systems. Wow. 17.5 billion in train infrastructure. So we really put all of this together in a green recovery program, building a better, a greener future, and creating jobs for the many people who want to be part of this journey already now.
Fantastic. Let's build forward together, as we've heard also in the previous panel. But the global economy is actually expected to expand by 5.6% in 2021, and it's the fastest post-recession pace since over 80 years. And that's largely due to some strong rebounds of a few major economies. But we all know that many of the emerging market and developing countries are still suffering from the COVID-19 crisis and its aftermath. So certainly we need to do more there. And that brings me to Minister Gerd Müller. Gerd Müller, Sie sind der Bundesminister für Entwicklung.
Gerd Müller, you are Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development. Can you hear me?
Oh, good.
Okay, good. Excellent.
Auf jeden Fall. Sie
So,
sind Bundesminister seit
you
2013.
have been Federal Minister since 2013. Please take your microphone into your hand. Thank you very much. And of course, you bring with you a lot of expertise in cooperation with these countries, with developing countries, emerging countries in Africa. Could you please share your thoughts and experiences? Well, based on your experiences, what could you do in these countries in order to tackle the crisis right now? So this great event involving so many eminent speakers, well, what is missing here is one decisive aspect. We don't save the climate in Austria. 0.2% of CO2 emissions worldwide are caused by Austria and 2% are caused by Germany. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't have ambitious goals at home and that we shouldn't do the things that should be done, for example, by going about climate-neutral construction like Mr. Heilmann does. We can only save the climate if we pull in concert internationally, if we also involve the emerging and developing countries. John Kerry said that the Chinese stand at a CO2 share, 27%, which is rising. Of the 195 countries all over the world, only 8 comply with the Paris Agreement climate requirements. But what is decisive is one point that has been fallen by the wayside today. Climate change hits those hardest who don't contribute to it. So we emit 10 tons per capita. The average person in Africa suffers from the consequences quite massively. Drought, loss of agriculture, plant world, wildlife habitats. We have 25 million refugees, climate refugees, and the African population emit 0.2 tons, and they are those suffering the most from this development. And now, to boot, there is a decisive point currently on the African continent. I could also talk about South America or about India. Well, on the African continent, 450 coal-fired power plants are in the pipeline or are being planned. So we could shut down 20, but if 450 are built anew by US investors, by Chinese investors, or by European investors, this is a bad bad situation, and thus we have to take a long-term and holistic view of the climate. The sky belongs to all of us, and this is why, dear colleague, Mr. Hoyer, we know each other very well and we agree, but there is a lack of ambition and action coming from the realm of politics. We need the expansion of the Green Deal for Africa. So we must make Africa the continent of green and renewable energy. The sunlight above the Sahara provides the power to produce hydrogen, methanol, solar, wind in abundance. We have the technology at our disposal. So let's get started, unless we will lose the race. If we only remain within our little Austria or little Germany, so constituting 1.5% of the world's population. So think big, dear Mr. Hoyer, and of the thousands of billions, well, I would also like to include the recovery program and the rich EU and rich Austria, rich Germany. They've all decided to support this endeavor financially. And no single euro has been earmarked by the EU for investing in Sierra Leone or Senegal for mitigating the impact of climate change. And this makes me angry. Here we need change in the realm of international politics. Absolutely, I absolutely agree. Well, based on your experience, what would be an effective approach? How can we translate into practice such an approach? What would be an approach that could be pursued in Germany when it comes to climate financing? What would be approaches that would be feasible and that would help countries today? What we have to do is to also make investments accessible to developing countries, to Africa. I think we can change the world by investments. So if they are worthwhile, we will invest. The big solar power plant in the world that we have been building with German support is located in Morocco. It was not worthwhile financially 10 years ago. We have to understand the economy. And as long as coal and gas are worthwhile financially, there will not be any change in terms of investment. But in the meantime, we have highly efficient solar power plants. The production of 1 kilowatt of solar energy costs 2 cents. And this is competitive, absolutely competitive. No coal-fired power plant can match here. And this is why we need private investment in cooperation with the European Investment Bank, with risk hedging, and there will be huge investment thrusts in these countries. And then I brought another message. Because we have to walk the talk, and most of the time politicians, great speakers, they adopt big papers, and I contributed a paper, and I would like to appeal to you, and I told it to the minister yesterday evening. What are you doing for climate change? You, me, what are we doing concretely? I launched a foundation, a private foundation called Development and Climate, and each and every one of you in this hall can make a personal contribution towards climate neutrality. Everyone in the company, so everyone in the Spanish writing school, also in your ministry, in Mrs. Gewessler, can become climate neutral. This constitutes action. Go home, join the foundation, become climate neutral, and reduce your personal footprint in the company, in the ministry. or when it comes to mobility, because we should not only wait for politicians, lawmakers, we should also make our personal contribution, such as Greta Thunberg, who is leading the way in this regard. Thank you so much. As the minister said, everyone has to make their contribution. Thank you very much.
With that, let me actually come now to Kate. Wonderful to have you here, Kate, and I'd love to just get your thoughts also on how can we move towards this green economic recovery. And you say in your book that a healthy economy should be designed to thrive, not grow. So that's an intriguing concept, and just love to hear more about it. And please introduce all of us to the economic donut model.
Thank you, and it's a huge pleasure to join you all today. And I'm really enjoying this conversation and very much agree with the energy of the Minister for Development from Germany. Thank you. So we know we need to transform our economies profoundly. And the 20th century model was based on the idea that the shape of progress is endless growth, endless accumulation. No matter how rich a nation already is, I'm sitting here in the UK, you're in Austria, from Germany, no matter how rich, and we are in the richest countries ever in the history of the world, our politics and our economics assumes that our success depends upon yet more growth indefinitely. This is not compatible with thriving upon a delicately balanced living planet. I believe the existential transformation we need to make is to realize that nations' economies need to grow and then grow up so that they can thrive. And this brings us to the donut. I have one here. So the goal is to leave nobody in the hole in the middle of the donut, falling short on the essentials of life. That's where people don't have the food, water, healthcare, education, transport that every person has a claim to. Leave no one in the hole, but at the same time, don't overshoot this outer ring of planetary boundaries, because that is where we destroy the life-supporting systems of this only known living planet in the universe. So the shape of progress for the 21st century is transformed. It is not endless growth. It is thriving in balance. And that changes everything. It means we put at the center of our vision becoming regenerative by design, regenerating the life support systems of our planet, but also becoming distributive by design so that value and opportunity is shared far more equitably within nations, but also between nations. This is either an overwhelming economic challenge or an utterly irresistible opportunity to bring the innovations and the new technologies and the new ways of organizing business and policy that we have long known we need. And I urge everyone to see this is an incredible opportunity to bring about transformations we already want to bring about.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate. I'd love to hear about one example. We have one success story where we know that that this model actually has been brought to practice, and that's Amsterdam. So can you just tell us all a little bit on how does it work in practice?
Yes, so let me say the first principle of the way we work at Donut Economics Action Lab is that we have never once asked or lobbied or requested anybody to use this framework. It's all change makers, and they are everywhere. It's change makers who say, I want to bring this to where we are. And in the city of Amsterdam, the city government decided to adopt the donut as their model for emerging from the COVID recovery and moving forwards. So they've put it at the center of their strategy for creating a circular economy. 50% commitment to circular material use by 2030. So in less than a decade, the commitment is that more than half of the materials in use in that city will be being reused, refurbished, repurposed, retrofitted. And that, of course, creates jobs and it reduces the city's impact on the whole planet. So along with acting on climate change, we must act on our material footprints worldwide. And this, to me, by the way, I must say that it's clear that giving ourselves boundaries, whether it's carbon pricing or a commitment to circularity, boundaries unleash creativity and innovation. It's so clear that when we put those boundaries in place, the companies stop putting all their energy into lobbying against regulation, and they get on and put their energy into creating innovations that meet and serve the future. So boundaries unleash our creativity. Let's create the boundaries of the old economy that we no longer want, so that it unleashes the one that we know we need.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate, and that's really intriguing. And think we have actually another question. We should have a video question, I think, to Kate.
Hello from Vöcklerbruck. My name is Sabine Pommer, and I have a question for Kate Raworth. How is it possible to overturn an entire economic paradigm? Where did you start to bring this revolutionary approach into action, especially in rural areas?
Thank you for that question. How do you overturn an entire economic paradigm? When we put it like that, it seems impossible. But as Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. And I believe the way things get done is by realizing that all change starts with someone, whether they are a minister or a CEO or a voter or the newest employee of a company or a mother at the gates of a school or each one of us in our own homes. I have been astounded over the last couple of years by the way that change makers pop up everywhere and say, I'm going to make this happen where I am. Whether it's from the personal action, transforming how we eat and travel and heat our homes, how we save and invest and divest and protest, or whether it is a CEO saying, I now have the courage and the conviction, as Maya said, it's the love and the legacy. Let us live on that. Bring that to your work, bring that to your politics, to your parliament, to your boardroom, to your classroom. This is the time. Are we going to step up? Because our children and their children will only ask us, what did you do once that you knew? And each and every one of us can say, I stepped up with the networks of influence that I have in my life, and I started to make that action. And that's how it all changes.
Fantastic. Well, let's just do it. I think I'm very impressed. I'm an economist, so just innovating paradigms in our field is not that easy, so kudos to you. And I think every one of us should really start with ourselves and trying to do that. But let's now actually move to the private sector and to a real entrepreneur, Clemens Hallmann. Sie sind ein Mann der Praxis mit viel Erfahrung.
You are a practitioner with a lot of experience in the construction sector, and you want to make your company climate neutral by 2040. In the area of construction and operation, of course, you have to become emissions-free. What is your secret of success in order to foster this green transformation? First of all, I want to say that I'm very happy to be again a leading partner of the Austrian World Summit this year. And yes, Austria has set itself the ambition to become climate neutral by 2040. In our company, we have set ourselves the goal to reach this goal even before 2040. And we have built many buildings in the future that are sparing on the resources. And in the 21st district of Vienna, we are currently building our first urban plus energy building. So we have 34,000 square meters with a mix of commercial and housing space. The premises will be supplied by 4,000 photovoltaic panels attached to the roof, 110 geothermal drillings reaching into the earth. There will be wind park shaving, regeneration of rainwater, and the list is non-exhaustive. But with this building, we will be able to generate energy, 650,000 kilowatts of energy per year, which is the same as supplying a single-family home per year. And we are talking about 15,000 trees in terms of CO2 compensation. But what is also important to us are the occupants of of our buildings. And there's one thing which must not fall by the wayside. It's not about acting ecologically, but these buildings should also be affordable for the occupants. I already said that this energy quarter, as the same suggests, plus energy, will generate more energy than it will need for full operation. So this means at the same time we will also curb the operating costs by about 50%. And in times of pandemic, we had to accept that each square meter more can be pure luxury. If you have work in your home office, every square meter counts, of course, if you need another room for your kids. So an average household has 75 square meters in the city of Vienna. So if I can save €1 to €1.50 per square meter, it would be about €1,000. But so there would be 7 to 8 square meters more than we could rent, and our buildings will also able to take to feed back excess energy, surplus energy, and thus we will be able to curb operating costs even further. And I think that currently, well, in the current mood, where more and more people live into metropolises, well, there will be a time of relocation. How should I put it? Also, people who are impervious to advice, owners who are impervious to advice, will see that it's not that smart to use a traditional gas heating systems and to view and to waste a lot of energy. And I think, well, if this transformation is to be done right and should be implemented swiftly. So I think these aspects should be reconciled. So we should act in an ecologically sustainable way, but at the same time, we should also act sparingly on the resources of the occupants.
This is really impressive. Thank you very much. We heard from you where it works, where are the challenges, where is it still difficult to build sustainably. Are there still any areas, white spots on the map? Yes. The existing building stock. Most of the existing buildings are beautiful to look at, but completely inefficient from the ecological perspective. We need further incentives coming from the political level to ensure that people are incentivized to renovate their buildings and to sanitize them. Because especially in old buildings, the provision of heating generates a lot of losses. The existing building stock should be provided with resource-saving renewables and new facilities, because the old buildings can do quite a lot. We just need to bring them up to speed and up to today's standard. And if you look at the global real estate industry, that accounts for 38% of CO2 emissions. And there are more old buildings than new buildings that are sustainable and saving our energy resources. But that's not the only topic that we need to struggle with in real estate, because we also need to consider the fact that construction materials also need to be counted, or the transport to the construction site and the machinery and tools that are needed at the construction site. And 99% of those are still operated with internal combustion engines that use fossil fuels, and that generates pollution. So you need to consider the entire cycle. Politicians and businesses will be called upon to go hand in glove in implementing these new policies, because to bring politicians and businesses on board will help us reach our climate targets more quickly. Maybe this circular model can help.
Let's get back to the financial sector. You were talking actually about the building stock, and obviously we need resources. It can be done, but we need resources. So we need to make sure that we are moving money into sustainable uses and away from high carbon assets. And we have actually an intervention from the floor, and I'm very happy to hand over to Remy Vrignot, who is the CEO of Allianz Austria, for his intervention. Remy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, there's no doubt that as an insurer, we are highly affected by climate and climate change. But we heard also today it's all about action, and we also realize that we can do a lot and also contribute a lot. So going back to 2014, Allianz in Austria was the first company in the financial sector deciding to introduce specific and measurable criteria, sustainability criteria in its investment portfolio. 2015, 1 year later, we decided to remove all coal mining investments out of our portfolio, and today we can say that a little bit more than 90% of our investments are sustainable, and we want to achieve 100% by 2030. We are truly convinced that investments into areas that have future, but even more that generate future for many of our generations and the future generations is done by our capital and done by the assets we are managing in the name of our customers. And this is our responsibility as investors. And this is the call, my call to the whole financial community and sector to follow us and to transform the assets under management we have into sustainable areas. And if I state that in Austria, if we take all the assets under management from all institutions, insurers, banks, pension funds, we accumulate 380 billion of euros. Now let's dream or imagine we can channel all these assets into sustainable ways. We can do a lot. So this is the call to teamwork to make the dream work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let me just echo the call for action again. I think call for action is important, but let me also thank you, Remy and Allianz, for actually leadership in the financial sector, amongst others, to the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance. I think you've been really trying to push to make sure that the financial sector moves towards a more sustainable future, so thanks for that. But with that, we are going into our second round. We are obviously a little bit running behind, so I'm going to be very brief in my second round, but I'd love to just go a little bit deeper and discuss the structural change. How can you actually really, what are drivers for structural change? And I'd like to start with you again, President Hoyer, because obviously, an institution like EIB has a lot to offer. How can an institution like EIB actually help foster some structural efforts and really that can green the whole financial system, and in a way also not only fund new green projects, but also really contribute to systems change?
Exactly, by following the advice that the gentleman from the insurance just gave us, because I'm fed up with all the doomsday scenarios in which we discuss. I like to hear a little bit more of yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
And here, I must say, I'm extremely encouraged by what's happening in the private sector, and particularly on the financial side. Before I had my speech in the United Nations, I was invited by the European Association of Insurance Companies, and they're the top bosses now. And they discussed the issue of fossil fuel investments. And they said, after a while, well, you're right. It's crazy to invest into something that you will have on your balance sheet for the next 30 or 40 years, and you know exactly, in 15 or 20 years, you have to write it off. So it is not ideology, it's not wishful thinking that drives me in the abolition of fossil fuels, it's economics, because at the end of the day, if we do not succeed in getting out there soon enough, we'll have something as stranded assets on the balance sheets, and this, at the end of the day, for a public institution like mine, lands on the balance sheet of the taxpayer. So let's do that now. And if this recognition is there more in the private sector sometimes than in the public sector, and I can encourage politicians only to listen to people like Mr. King Mr. Fink from BlackRock, for instance, who has written to all CEOs in the world that they should take this into consideration and align with the new thinking on climate innovation and development.
I completely agree, and I just want to say, we at my organization, we've been starting to actually track progress, and I do have to say the private sector has made a lot of progress. The public sector, and not all the public sector, but lots of the institutions are actually lagging. How can we, however, make sure that we know how we measure progress? Is there, I'd love to hear your view on the taxonomy, but particularly because I do feel we need to have a common language to really understand.
Absolutely, we need to have principles, and we were the ones who issued the first green bonds in 2007. And everybody in the market thought this is a pretty lunatic idea, it will fail. It did not fail, but only after we made sure that we would avoid greenwashing, green cheating. So also for the new technologies that we want to go into, we need to make sure that for the financing of these activities, we need to have rules. This is what the taxonomy is for. The word is stupid because for some people it's deterrent because of the first three letters. Tax, no, it has nothing to do with tax. It has something to do with order. You need to bring order into the system. You need to have accountability, transparency, and reporting needs. And if that is given, then the investors trust you, and then they give you the money. I need to go to the markets every year in order to finance the activities of my bank for 60 to 90 billion euros. So you need the trust of the investors, and if you cheat them by greenwashing, then they will not come anymore.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Herr Hallmeier, wir haben gerade gehört, was die Taxonomie ist.
Mr. Hallmeier, we just heard what this taxonomy entails, why it is important. What does this mean in practice, especially in the building sector? How do you prepare for these new rules of the game that will hopefully no longer support greenwashing? Well, we have been dealing with the subject for many years now, so we are well equipped and well prepared. We are currently developing more than 500,000 square meters in 3 European countries that will be in line with the new taxonomy rules, or like the plus energy neighborhood that we are building. We are going to by far exceed these rules. But the taxonomy regulation is a very important tool for the future, because the financial sector will get more transparency and security to provide funding and financing for sustainable, resource-saving real estate. Listening to the gentleman from Allianz, the insurance company, in future, every insurance company, every institutional investor will have taxonomy-certified real estate in their portfolio. And in a few years' time, only those will be bought, because there's no other way. Absolutely. Thank you. This puts enormous pressure on the real estate industry to use sustainable, resource-saving buildings. And I think this is right and important, because we are trying to build such buildings and others in our industry as well. But unfortunately, it's not enough in order to reduce our CO2 footprint in our industry. So let me make an appeal. Follow our example. It works. It doesn't hurt. You can do a lot and you can achieve a lot. And I would like to thank my friend Arnold Schwarzenegger and Monika Langthaler and her team for this excellent Austrian World Summit. And I think this is yet another important signal for environmental protection for this planet. If we plant the right seeds, tomorrow will be better, is our motto.
And thanks for another call for action. But with that, actually, we are going to focus on one more concrete example. We have one more intervention from the audience. We have Ingmar Hörbart, who is the Managing Director of the Austrian Climate and Energy Fund, and I'm looking forward to hearing your climate action story.
Yes, thank you very much. The Climate and Energy Fund has been dealing for 14 years with the transformation of the energy and mobility systems. We are dealing with very concrete solutions for the future that can be implemented. So we are dealing with concrete models to demonstrate how innovative technologies and innovative systems can be used to create solutions for the future. To link up with Mr. Hallmann, our program of model refurbishments shows how to produce plus energy neighborhoods and use clever refurbishment. Our climate and energy model regions are another example. We have 2 model region managers that were connected via video. The regions are on the way towards achieving 100% renewables. So they move away from fossil fuels. They are converting the entire system. And what's special about these regions is that we are very close to citizens. It's a bottom-up movement that is supported by citizens' commitment. This brings me to the heart of the matter, because this civil movement will now get an enormous thrust by an EU directive, which will hopefully be passed in the Austrian Parliament next week in the Renewables Expansion Act, and it's about energy communities. Let me briefly explain how it works. Energy communities make it possible that individual citizens get together in a group and produce energy together. They use it, store it, or they can also sell it. Now, what do these energy communities do? They give us the possibility for every individual member to become part of the energy transition. This helps the sustainable economy and create green jobs. This is an essential contribution to ensure that we bring the population on board all over Europe. And this will also help us to have the relevant impact to implement the Green Deal and reach our climate goals. Thank you very much. And once again, a concrete proposal how we can all chip in. Thank you very much for another climate action story.
I just ask you, really following up on the taxonomy discussion, what is your view? Do you think this EU taxonomy can really help push towards this green economic transformation? A very brief thought from your side, please.
Yes, it is an essential first step, because it begins to put in place those boundaries, those rules. For example, the critical rule of do no significant harm. This is a really important advance over the old approach of cost-benefit analysis, which could justify selling anything. Ultimately, if you do your calculations, you can get away with any story. Do no significant harm brings us clear rules that protect life, that protect the planet. Now, what's going to happen is, how is this put into practice? This is the moment for ensuring that doesn't get greenwashed, green cheating, watered down, twisted, because that is so often what happens. So I call on everybody who is involved in the actual implementation of these rules to hold them to the significance of this decade, the critical moment of this opportunity, and stand for ensuring through the insurance, through the finance, through industry, that we transform now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate. And again, I couldn't agree more. But let's come back for a moment before we close to the international perspective. We all know that the pandemic continues to inflict poverty and inequality on the people in developing countries. Minister Gerd Müller, in Deutschland hat natürlich sehr viele Erfahrung.
In Germany, you have a lot of experience with development aid and development assistance with developing countries that are still strongly affected by the coronavirus pandemic. What does Germany do in that respect? What are you doing now, and what are some of the long-term measures in order to address the pandemic and the climate crisis? Well, you're opening up a completely new topic, and I'm very pleased that this gives us a chance to look beyond our own living room. I was in Sierra Leone 10 days ago. Next to no one has access to vaccines there. The African continent and developing countries on the whole are currently only vaccinated to the tune of 2 or 3%. Does this make us happy? Is it satisfying? I'm not going to name any industrialized countries, but it's not Austria, not Germany. But if an industrialized country has 5 times as many vaccines as they need for their population, because they might have to have a booster for somebody else, well, open up your fridges, practice solidarity. Vaccines are a global good, a global commodity, and we need to be aware of the fact that today, I think, is the first day where you no longer have to wear a mask in Austria. The virus will be back unless we defeat it all over the world. It came from Wuhan, it's not gone back. The African countries are currently being fully hit. We have a lockdown in Bangladesh as of today. First India, now Bangladesh. So if we can't stop this pandemic worldwide, we will not be safe. And this is why global solidarity is called for. But it is not words, that action that we need. And this is why you have invited me, and this is why we, 10 days ago, and this is a new development that is not even known here, and I would like to invite Mr. Hoyer to also participate as the European Investment Bank. Africa and the developing countries need their own vaccine production. Because if you say, well, Austrians and Germans should renounce their vaccinations, there will be discussions. So we need a dedicated production of vaccines in Africa and other developing countries. And this is why the Institut Pasteur in Senegal decided that, well, the developing countries are not still caught up in the last century. They can keep pace with us in many areas, and I have given the impetus. We are going to fund this with 20 million. As of April, Senegal and at the same time also South Africa are going to start entering vaccine production. So the objective needs to be to produce vaccines and to vaccinate also poor people in developing countries. Otherwise, the virus will be back. I agree with you. Thank you very much for this important input.
In light of COVID-19, clearly we do know that we need to continue the support for developing countries. So let me come for my last question to you, Minister Gewessler. We know Austria has really increased climate ambition over the last years. As an Austrian, I'm very happy to hear about that. I'd love to hear a bit more. I mean, we've heard you've increased your contribution to the Green Climate Fund. You know, we have an important partner with the Austrian Development Bank. What is it that Austria is exactly doing in order to support countries in addressing both the climate and the COVID crisis?
Thanks a lot, and I'd like to echo something that Mr. Müller has said before, my colleague from Germany, that it can never be an either-or. We'll need climate action at home in order to deliver, and we need to do this as a matter of solidarity, but also as a matter of climate justice with a global perspective and with a global view. Because this is a global crisis. We're in this together. What's true in the story of the corona pandemic is just as true in the story of the climate crisis. So yes, Austria increased its contribution to the Green Climate Fund fivefold last year, which I was very happy to be able to navigate. The Austrian Development Bank that you mentioned is the biggest donor in Austrian climate finance, and it has just announced this week only that as of 2023, 40% of the funding will be targeted to climate finance. And in the ministry, we're also focusing on adaptation, rural development, and also giving additional funds from the climate action side of things to bilateral projects, also taking into account gender aspects, also taking into account the rights of indigenous people. So projects are taking place in Brazil, in Nicaragua, in Kenya, in Uganda, to just name a few. And for what's a cross-cutting issue across all of them is that we cooperate very intensively with NGOs, and that the projects have a participatory approach. Fantastic. Because it's just as a very final point, I'd like to echo something that Kate Raworth has just said, that Arnold Schwarzenegger has said in the beginning, an active, vital, loud, powerful civil society will be crucial in developing and in advancing the solutions in moving towards climate neutrality. And we want to support that wherever possible, whether at home, where I hear civil society, whether abroad, because I really want to thank everybody. Whether you're active in an NGO, whether you're a CEO of a company who's stepping up and saying, yes, I'm ready for change. Really thank you all for your activism, because this is what will move us forward. This is what will bring us forward. It's the most important thing you can do is get active, organize, and we will manage, because we've shown in the last year how we can deal with the crisis. So we will show that we can deal with the next
Fantastic.
one.
Let's build forward together. Let's make sure that we all do it together. We start from all our own, as we say it in Austrian, let's start in front of our doors and really make sure that we all contribute the personal climate action stories. Just a very quick sum up. Policies lead the way. We need good policies. We need good regulatory frameworks. We need to use public and development finance effectively, wisely to unlock private capital, particularly in emerging economies. And we need innovation to address the sectors and the geographies that are harder at the moment to address. And I think finally we need to shift the whole financial system and really make sure that mainstream is happening. Mainstream is the need of the day. At the heart of that effort is data, is transparency, is the need for a common language like the taxonomy. So for me, it's really up to all of us. We need collaboration for that, but first of all, we need action from all of us. And we will hear about more actions in our next panel, which is the power of consumers, where Barbara Meyer will lead you through some innovative business approaches, both for the small and the large scale. So please join me in thanking my fantastic panel here and virtual for a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much, everyone.